Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Mehek Joshua. I'm working as an associate professor with Amity University. And today I'll be discussing about the works of Rachel Carson and her focus on inflamed ecological consciousness. Now we all know that Rachel Carson was an American writer, scientist, and environmentalist. Carson intrigued the bibliophiles with her works on the marvels of the ocean and side effects of artificial substances like pesticides. Her works focused on ecocriticism. Now let us first discuss what ecocriticism is. Ecocriticism is a commitment to environmentality from whatever critical vantage point. During 1970s, the relation between literary text and the ecosystem surfaced as a subject of profound and pervasive concern among authors and intellectuals. The opinions, discussions, and articles that sprouted out of this phase consequently come together and merged into the arena which is now well known as eco-criticism. In the past 20 years, eco-criticism has advanced from its initial personification as a comparatively under-hypothesized realm of the environment writing aficionados. At present, it is in the vivacious state as an urbane display of earth-centered slants to enlightening dispatchments that muster and redevelop philosophies taken from a variety of subjects, like biology, sociology, environmental science, and philosophy. The multiplicity also connects with an array of scholarly structures and progressively media platforms to an interest in depictions of the urban. At its core is the belief together that humans are facing ecological catastrophe that necessitates us to reconsider with some sort of urgency our lifestyles that needs to be changed and is responsible for damaging the environment. Its responsibility is to probe and criticize these observations, even within ecology itself, with few eco-critics also dedicated to discovering alternate methods of conceptualizing man's connection with the nature. Now, in this regard, Donald Boston has very rightly said that we are facing a global crisis today, not because of how ecosystems function, but rather because of how our ethical systems function. Now, eco-criticism is considered as a scholarly concept of recent origin, although in reality, its facets are unearthed in the mechanism of the earlier text. Romantic composers are believed as the basics of eco-criticism. They re-experienced this enigmatic world and offered a fresh idea for relishing the magnificence of environment. Eco-criticism as a field of scholarly query began to gain magnitude and importance in 1990s in the Western educational sphere. Nevertheless, this does not suggest that ecologically acquainted matters were missing in the earlier works. In fact, ecologically problematic matters were discovered in as early as in the Western fiction, the Epic of Gilgamesh, as well as in Eastern writings like the sacrosanct text of Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, Jainism, and innumerable parables and myths linked with those traditions. Literature stayed invulnerable to the environmental explanations and worldviews as each critic was establishing a nature conservation style to chronicle in isolation, but they did not organize themselves into an identifiable group. Now, since ancient times, literature has been paralleling the numerous manifestations that have formed the entire progression of history for manhood. Various rebellions, conflicts, and combats, and the upsurge and descent of the kingdoms. Hence, it is not to be wondered that works should support a link that exists between humans and the natural environment. With the progression of a human from a biped creature to a modern day scientifically formed man, the association between men and nature has also evolved through the passing on stages of curiosity, apprehension, admiration, respect, and apathy. The first wave of eco-criticism centered on environment writing, poetry, backward fiction. The main aim of the movement was to maintain biotic community. The eco-criticism of this movement described the consequences of civilization upon environment with a stance for honoring environment and invalidating the destruction through electoral action. So eco-criticism initially aimed at earth care. Now, frequently the consequence is an analytical view of how our society lessens and destroys the innate world. Now, we'll discuss about the works of Rachel Carson. Rachel Carson. Now, if nation and culture is evaluated by the astuteness of its methods, the 21st century owes significant appreciation to Silent Spring's author Rachel Carson. She was an environmentalist, a writer, and a preservationist whose works acknowledged with furthering the international ecological movement. The author's work transformed how individuals comprehended their association with the natural environment. Her most popular work, The Silent Spring, published in 1962, and it was described as the toxic impact of synthetic pesticides and warned that the unsystematic usage of these complexes may possibly lead to a planet bereft of the pleasant echoes of singing birds that typically score the onset of spring. She concentrated in specific on DDT, a pesticide, that bioaccumulates in animals' body. Birds with high level intensities of DDT present in their bodies generate sap shells that frequently break down before hatching of the broods. Carson envisions the situation of Central America's town, which was experiencing from the devastating consequences of pesticides. What complemented the transformation of American farming was primarily the pervasive use of such contemporary agrarian know-hows as compost and pesticides that made placing loads of stress on the ecosystem. The town is a manifestation of numerous US cities and towns of 60s. It is an exceedingly descriptive metaphor of industrialized society leading civilizations to destroy itself. Civilization not only devastates the environment but also harms human race itself. Carson cautioned about the ill effects of these chemicals on a future generation. Now, the Silent Spring indicated that the earthly ecology was touching the boundaries of what it could withstand. She stood behind her admonitions of the effects of arbitrary usage of pesticide in spite of the danger of lawsuits from the chemical industry and allegations that she was involved in emotionally and flagrant misrepresentations. However, Rachel was never against a total ban of pesticides. As she said, that the booming sales of chemical crabgrass killers are either examples of how readily unsound methods catch on. There's a cheaper and better way to remove crabgrass than to attempt year after year to kill it out with chemicals. Now, this is to give it competition of a kind it cannot survive, the competition of the other grass. In the novel, Rachel profound natural enemies to fight insects. Now, this book ferociously strikes the loss inflicted on the planet and environment by pesticides and places a strong point of a pen immediately at the creation of DDT. Carson grievously snubbed the attention of the rural consumerists and the factions of researchers linked to them who condemned grouped up against Carson and even initiated the fatal strikes. The New York Times came up with the title The Silent Spring is Now Noisy Summer while reviewing her case. The author stubbornly defied the burden, published the book, and it turned out to be one of America's high-earning books in the entire world. It is specifically for this reason, America passed an eco-friendly law. The book became a spinning moment for biological challenges. She organized clear, opulently rhythmical, and easy-to-comprehend language to critically define the ill effects of DDT on America's air, water, soil, and other resources. She also highlighted the loss suffered from the misuse of pesticides, which significantly overshadowed the advantages they were giving. The reason that Silent Spring entered the bestseller list is not only her political message based on Carson's research, but also her ability to express her warning and show the way out of the problem. This book not only kindled public anger and awakened them to the crisis with the examples of poisoning, but also showed the remedy for human beings. All this is not to say there is no insect problem and no need of control. Rachel said that, it must be controlled. Control must be granted to realities, not to mythical situations, and that the methods employed must be such that they do not destroy us along with insects. Another very popular work, Under the Sea, is also, gives us a very fascinating account of the sea creatures and the relation they share with each other. Under the Sea Wind, with amazing artistic drawings by Howard Fitch, was outdone by the outburst of the World War II and resulted in a commercial disaster. The author haven't stopped trying, and it was again published to huge commendations in 1952. Event is divided into three sections, portraying a picture of the sea and its life from the viewpoint of sea creatures. The first section, Edge of the Sea, follows a female sanderling Carson named Silverbar. The second section, The Gull's Way, follows a mackerel named Scober. And the third section, River and Sea, follows Anguilla and Eel. Now, the narrator follows these creatures' migration habits over the span of years. The methodical description of the book is a fundamental feature as it was envisioned as a logical endeavor by Rachel Carson, who herself is an ecologist and deeply enmeshed in rational examination and manuscript. Carson used the word sea when described the entirety of the seashore, sky, and sea. Carson had a profound way of literature about environment, while still preserving the systematic precision of her thoughts. Her work illustrates the relationship between home and nature, the boundaries of interconnected communities, and the increasing disengagement between human and environment. Carson took motivation from ecological history writers like Henry Williamson and Henry Beston and utilizes her systematic proficiency to pitch Under the Sea Wind in a logical manner, giving detailed description about each animal's form, eating habits, and behavior. Carson's purpose was to create the sea life as a very colorful experience for the readers. Another very popular work is The Sea Around Us, which also gives another, very gripping account of the sea. Now, the book is an award-winning and best-selling work by the Rachel Carson, first printed by the Oxford University Press in 1951. Now, the book showed the signs and rhymes of the life of the sea while varying from its ancient creations to the newest logical investigations. The book told the mysterious and exhilarating narrative about how the sea came into existence and how Earth's life surpassed from them. Carson is a researcher by profession who transpired to acquire the expressive, ingenious character of a terrific author. She writes of the seething life of the high echelons of the frozen dark primordial naders of the enormous forces who realize their mean in undercurrents and tides of soaring highlands and deserted valleys. She defined the pulsations of spring when Atlantic salmon migrate and jellyfish gather in significant figures to spawn of the mysterious creatures that till now escape all the efforts of men to capture them. She very beautifully pictured the whole view. Now, in this distinctive and interesting manuscript, the author has presented a memoir of the sea from the most primitive instances and attracted an all-encompassing image in glorious style of the fabulous aquatic sphere, which disappears underneath its perplexing exterior. Carson marks the first phase of the oceanic life and the turmoil of the Earth's natural paroxysms and reveals how the planet's earliest raw forms of life surpassed from its brackish warmth. By any criteria and specifications, this is a classic text. Now, let us discuss the influence of Rachel's work. The author was a major contributor in transforming the way the people thought about conservation. Her early penned works exhibited the notion that beings were not the center of the world's ecologies by portraying the natural environment from the perspective of non-human beings. Carson's highly distinguished book, Silent Spring, backed Carson's idea of progressive anthropocentricity all through the contentious that new logical advances should be quizzed as to why and for what reasons have been they are put into practice. An added question triggered by Silent Spring considered whether people should modify environment for personal purposes or try to leave it unaffected. Silent Spring aided to ignite a nationwide discussion about scientific accountability, restrictions on developments in technical know-how, and biochemical pesticides in common. The point that her contentious fueled such forceful conservations and is a testament to how important the author genuinely was. Now, moreover, Silent Spring headed to the prohibition of manufacture of uh, the DDT by 1972, alongside the execution of government rules and guidelines to safeguard the natural environment. Carson has also made people understand the view that whatever people put into the nature must be structured and legal so that the negative consequences can be reduced. Though the chemical production houses and their associates endeavored to show that Carson made blunders and overstated that the perils of pesticides in her contentious, her investigation has usually stayed the test of time. Furthermore, the queries she mentioned about the collection of these hazardous chemicals in living beings are today even more pertinent. She was particularly apprehensive about the long-term widespread impacts of these biocides used in ever larger amounts, were relentlessly in the ecosystem and glided hysterically frequently focusing in viruses in regions far separated from the initiation point. She, very correctly projected that the reliance on pesticides would lead to pesticide treadmill as bacteria developed quickly into more resilient types, forcing either greater quantities or additional biocides. In the past few years, the main emphasis of anxiety with respect to pesticides and associated chemicals has transformed from cancer and the possible for hereditary transformations, and both are the major hazards of these substances. Various pesticides have also resulted in reducing fertility in women, generate testicular, cause breast cancer, and result in malforming the venereal tissues. Now, in the 1970s and 1990s, the prevalence of testicular cancer in US rose by 50%, though the last 50 years has seen a decline in the sperm counts globally by 50%. Now, Carson's book is still relevant as the pesticide problem has grown with the passage of time. Now, it is not her only achievement. The sea around us and the edge of the sea, apart from shaping the public considerations of oceans conservationism, but also encourage a public desire for all possessions of oceanography. As new knowledge allowed army and technical scientists to see greater into the deep sea than ever before, pictures of the wide open ocean were projected through customer markets into accessible, understandable, and even wearable types. This objectification of seas and oceans and Carson's eco-centric communication both allowed and exasperated her efforts to encourage environmental learning. They also divulge a great deal about our modern day connection to the Earth's water, which are sites of both lasting wonder and a remarkable development. Carson's scholarly character was by 1956 closely associated with the notion that a wide-eyed consideration to usual platitudes such as bird songs, thunderstorms, or seashells could yield an inspiring sense of wonder, particularly for contemporary bibliophiles who detach them from the ordinary world. Her works are pitched for a well-informed middle class and mostly female readers who were not merely divulging new knowledge about the seas and ocean, but essentially, making oceans more stylish milieu. I think with this discussion, you must have got a fair idea about Rachel Carson and her works and her, focus on the eco-criticism. Thank you.